We would use letters that are very similar to those of the that would make out the sound of the word. And most people know what a transliteration is, but just so that I can make this more plain for viewers that may not quite understand what I'm speaking about. So when we say the word antichristo from the Latin word, it was transliterated into English as antichrist. But in English, the word anti is someone or something that is against something else. So you would think this is something that is against Christ. Well, in one way, that would be a nice way to put it. But it's only a transliteration. It's not the real thing. So what is antichristo? What is the word anti in the Greek language? According to Strong Concordance, it is a substitute or someone that is in place of. The correct way to translate this word anti is using the word vicar, a vicar of Christ, or a vicarious, the word vicarious. The very word would be the only way to truly translate this correctly, because that's what a vicar is. A vicar, of course, another Latin term, is the same thing as anti. It is something that is in place of. It is a substitute. What many people say, vicarious filii Dei, instead of the Son of God, the Latin terminology. It's the same word as anti in the Greek language. And so every pope that has ever come along for the Roman Catholic Church takes on the title of the Vicar of Christ or the Antichristo. It's one and the same. It is a substitute or one that is taking the place of. It is a similitude. And if you look these words up in Strong Concordance, you will find this out, that this is exactly the same meaning. So the popes themselves have identified themselves publicly right before your eyes to be the Antichrist. It's kind of interesting to say the least. Quite, as I said, very much unbeknownst to Pope Francis, that he's actually identified himself as the Antichrist. Now, something else I wanted to share with you, and many of you may already be aware of this, the very word vicarious filii Dei, the Latin term, this is actually something that is on the triple crown of the Pope. You can find it in Rome. And of course, the Vatican has no problem whatsoever in accepting this title. They believe that the Pope of Rome is God on earth. It's in their own statements. It's in their own, the former popes in the past have clearly said that he is God on earth. He takes the place of Christ. That's why they call him a vicar or an anti, as the Greek word would say, one that is in place of or instead of, actually is the way Strong's brings it out. Okay, vicarious filii Dei, which is right there in Vatican, the Roman city there, this is the title that is given to the Pope. If you take the numeric value of this title, the V in vicar being equal to 5, the I equal to 1, the C equals to 100, the A and the R have no value. I equals 1. Also, at the end of this particular broadcast, take a look at the chart, very interesting chart that you'll see there that'll give you even more proofs. In the Latin language, both U, the letter U, and the letter V are synonymous, one and the same, representative of the number 5. And then, of course, S has no value because, remember, it's written over the Pope vicarious, which that's equals to 112. Remember, the scripture says it is the number of a man. Also, the filii, which is F-I-L-I-I in Latin, F having no value, again, 1, or the I being equals to 1. The L is equal to 50, and 2 more I's to follow, both equaling to 1 each, which is the number 53 in total value. Then we get to the last part of it, DI. See, DEI, D equaling 500 in the numeric value of the Latin letters. E has no value, and again, I is equaling to 1. Add these numbers up, 501 plus 53 and 112, you'll get 666. Those of you that catch the YouTube here, or catch our Israeli News Live on YouTube, you will actually get to see this chart there. We haven't quite got to the technicality on live stream here to be able to post that. That is coming in the very near future. And the time frame right now, running at 10 p.m. on live stream, will continue over in the U.S. We'll be picking a new time frame when we go over back to Europe and over into Israel. Something that will work for places all around the world to be able to view. Now, I want to bring one other important thing out, though, that I thought was very interesting as well. Again, identifying the Pope of Rome as the Antichristo, the Antichrist, the one that is in place of the Messiah. And that is the word in Hebrew. We have a word that you can say the Roman, or a Roman man, Romiti. And it's spelled Resh Vav Mem Yud Tav Yod. Excuse me, Yod Tav Yod. Yod. This here literally means Roman man, and it's how you were to write it out in the Hebrew language. And again, another interesting point, because remember, according to Daniel's prophecy, the prince that shall come shall be of the people that destroyed the city and the sanctuary of Jerusalem. In 70 AD, it was Titus the Roman general. And what is the Roman general? He's a Roman man. And of course, the prince that shall come is going to be of this particular people. And that's correct. We clearly see this. So in the future, from the time of 70 AD, which we're now 2,000 years later, we would have a Roman Antichristo, a Roman Antichrist, or a prince that shall come. And of course, notice again, there again, it's a prince. And right before that, in verse, just before that, in verse 26, we find out that what does Daniel identify? That the anointed prince, the Mashiach, the Messiah, would be cut off, but not for himself. That's the true prince. But then he speaks of this other prince that shall come. And he's never called the Mashiach, the other prince that comes, which clearly, again, identifies an Antichristo, one that would take the place of the Mashiach, one that would be like the Messiah. Well, kind of interesting, if you call him a Roman man, as Titus was, he was a Roman man in Hebrew, again, this has a numeric value in Hebrew. The Resh having the numeric value of 200, the I is a 6, the Im is a 40, the Yod is a 10, Tav is 400, and again, the Yod is a 10. I'm not getting into Kabbalah or nothing like that. I'm not saying what it means. I'm just showing you because every number in Hebrew actually has a numeric value, just like Latin does. And in many other languages, because at one time in the Bible, of course, well, it still is in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, we use letters for the numbers of the chapters and verses. That's the way the Bible is laid out. So this is not Kabbalah. We're not saying what they mean or represent, just showing the letter having a numeric value. If you add these up, again, it adds up to 666. Remember, according to the Brit Chadashah, the New Testament, the Christian Bible, it says that it'll be the number of a man. And his number is 666, or 666. So the Roman man, it adds up to 666 as well. What's even more interesting, though, the word Roman man is also translated as another Hebrew word in modern Hebrew, and it means betrayed. And it's exactly the truth. It's been a Roman man, Pope Francis and all the other popes, that have betrayed the Jewish people for the last 2,000 years. Well, judgment will soon come, and God will set the stage straight the way it should be. Let's continue on in other news quickly here, going to Tehran Times. We're following a little story here where it says Iran, Syria, and Iraq will form an alliance against terror. They're dealing with what they call terror, and of course, a lot of times when they call terror, they're speaking of the Israelis. But we know that they're also combating ISIS, and we mentioned many times before on Israeli News Live, ISIS is something that the United States helped fund and back secretly. They have not come out to admit that, but it was created in Jordan. So it's kind of interesting. You don't see Jordan very much involved in this. Of course, they have been involved in bombing campaigns just to make it look good, I suppose. But anyway, it says here that Tehran Ali Akbar Vayati, a senior advisor to the leader of the Islamic Revolution, says Iran, Syria, and Iraq will form an alliance against terrorism in the future. Talking to reporters on the sidelines of his meeting with Syrian Interior Minister Mohammed al-Sahar on Tuesday, Valiati said Iran, Iraq, and Syria can defeat terrorism through cooperation. It's kind of interesting how they're joining together. And of course, if we see Syria, Iran, and Iraq join forces, it only spells trouble for Israel in the not-so-distant future. It says the first circle of the resistance of the campaign against terrorism has been formed by Iran, Iraq, and Syria, and we are certain that with the unity of the three countries, we can win over terrorism in the future. A close relationship will take shape among the three countries. Veliati said Syria and Iraq are fighting terrorism on the behalf of all countries in the region, since terrorism has no borders. Again, it sounds like a nice thing, but what's going to shape up, who knows? It seems like, though, that Iran is definitely leading the region or this part of the world. They've also been trying to take over Yemen with the Houthis, and of course Saudi Arabia has kind of been a thorn in their side there. But if Iran takes over this region of the world, it will certainly spell disaster, no doubt, for Israel. But there again, we are fully in believing that God Himself, Yeshua, the Mashiach, will actually intervene for Israel on their behalf, because it will take that, especially with the rest of the world turning against Israel, the European Union, the United States, NATO, everyone is turned against Israel. So it is definitely going to take the coming of the Messiah, which we believe is the second time He's coming, in order to intervene on Israel's behalf. Also, the IDF destroyed the rocket launcher used to attack Israel earlier this week. Those of you that are aware of it, that Gaza had launched rockets into Israel. So the IDF